There were reportedly not even going to be dwarfs either. Rainbow people instead. I thought it was a fan protest. And even the word dwarfs isn't mentioned in this remake. The film has people saying, don't mock sleepy as a neurological condition. And dopey isn't really dopey. That'd be rude.
The unthinkable just happened. Rachel Zegler has been officially fired by Disney. The actress, once set to lead the highly anticipated Snow White 2025 remake, has now been completely erased from the studio's future projects. This decision isn't just another Hollywood casting change, it's a full-scale corporate meltdown. Disney had placed its biggest bet on Zegler, expecting her to carry the legacy of their first-ever animated film. Instead, she became the face of one of the worst PR disasters in the company's history. But what could have pushed one of the world's most powerful studios to drop their own lead actress just months before release? And how did Snow White, a beloved childhood classic, turn into a multi-million-dollar catastrophe before it even hit theaters?
Peter Dinklage questioned why the story even included the characters at all.
They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White.
Yeah.
Seven Dwarfs.
Sure.
So, look, take a step back and look at what you're doing.
This isn't just about one actress losing a role. It's about an entire empire crumbling from within. It started with a dream. Disney's plan to bring Snow White to a new generation. A lavish budget, cutting-edge CGI, and a star-studded cast were meant to modernize the timeless fairy tale. But almost immediately, the cracks began to show. Test screenings were a disaster. Reports confirmed that audiences found the film unwatchable. The jokes fell flat, the pacing dragged, and worst of all, the story had been completely rewritten beyond recognition. But the movie itself wasn't the only problem. The real catastrophe was happening off-screen.
A new trailer is out for Snow White, and if you thought that Disney was going to salvage this film after all the backlash that it received about the direction it was going in remaking the 1937 classic, you were wrong.
And it had everything to do with Rachel Zegler herself. Zegler wasn't just playing the lead role. She was single-handedly alienating the very audience that grew up loving Snow White. Instead of celebrating the character, she publicly mocked the original film, calling it outdated and problematic. In interview after interview, she dismissed the classic love story, rolling her eyes at the idea of Prince Charming and declaring that this version of Snow White would be about a strong, independent woman who didn't need to be saved. Her words might have sounded progressive on paper, but to Disney's loyal fans, it was a slap in the face. This wasn't just another live-action remake, it was a butchering of a childhood treasure, and Zegler was leading the charge. The backlash was instant and brutal. Fans who had grown up with the 1937 classic were furious, accusing Disney of destroying one of their most beloved films. The hashtag #NotMySnowWhite took over social media, racking up millions of views and comments. YouTube and TikTok were flooded with videos calling out Zegler's attitude, with fans dissecting her interviews and mocking her dismissive tone. Memes ridiculing the new Snow White spread like wildfire, and within days, Zegler had become one of the most disliked figures in Hollywood. But instead of stepping back and addressing the concerns, she doubled down, responding with sarcasm and condescending remarks that only added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Disney executives were in full-blown panic mode.
A series of controversies is threatening to derail the opening of Disney's latest big-budget blockbuster. I'm talking about the live-action remake of Snow White, which will be out next week.
The marketing team, already struggling to sell the film, was now facing an impossible task. How do you promote a movie that nobody wants to see? Internal projections showed that audiences were actively rejecting the film, and with each passing day, the numbers were looking worse. But the worst part? This wasn't just a PR issue. This was a financial disaster waiting to happen. Disney had already poured hundreds of millions into the film, and now they were watching their investment crumble in real time. Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, had a choice to make. He had weathered box office failures before, but this was different. This wasn't just a bad movie. This was a ticking time bomb that threatened to destroy Disney's reputation, its brand, and its future box office performance. And with ticket sales for the Marvels and Indiana Jones 5 already falling off a cliff, Disney couldn't afford another failure. There was only one way to stop the bleeding. Rachel Zegler had to go, and just like that, the decision was made. Effective immediately, Zegler was removed from all future Disney projects. The actress who was once set to become the face of a new generation of princesses had now been silenced, erased, and left without a future in the mouse house. But this wasn't just about firing an actress. This was a desperate attempt to save a sinking ship. What Disney did next would send shockwaves through Hollywood, but the damage was already done. Rachel Zegler was gone.
Now, fans are growing more concerned about Disney's new Snow White remake, mostly because of what the lead actress has been saying to the press. Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney.
But the nightmare for Disney was far from over. If anything, her firing only confirmed the worst fears about Snow White 2025, that the movie was a complete disaster, and even Disney knew it. Removing Zegler wasn't a fix, it was a desperate attempt to contain the fallout. But behind the scenes, executives were scrambling. The decision had been made, but now they had to deal with the consequences. Almost immediately, questions started piling up. Would Disney delay the movie? Would they try to recast Snow White at the last second? And most importantly, was the film even salvageable? The truth was ugly. Snow White wasn't just suffering from bad press. The movie itself was broken. Internal reports confirmed that test audiences hated it. Viewers complained that the humor felt forced, the writing was bland, and worst of all, the story completely abandoned the original fairy tale. The Prince Charming storyline had been scrapped entirely. The Seven Dwarfs had been replaced with random, non-dwarf characters. And Snow White was no longer a love story, but a political statement. Executives were now stuck in an impossible position. If they pushed forward, they risked a full-blown box office disaster. But if they scrapped the movie altogether...
There's more. There's always more. Let's have a listen.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
It would mean hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain. And then there was the Rachel Zegler problem. What would she do next? For the first time since the controversy started, Zegler herself went completely silent. No cryptic Instagram posts, no sarcastic tweets, no desperate attempts to explain herself, nothing. Industry insiders speculated that Disney's legal team had forced her to sign an NDA, preventing her from discussing the situation publicly. Others believed she was working on her own statement, one that would paint Disney as the villain and frame her firing as a personal attack. If Zegler lashed out against the studio, it could further damage the movie's already fragile reputation, and Disney couldn't afford any more bad press. Meanwhile, Disney's marketing team was in full-blown crisis mode. Internally, employees were ordered to scrub Zegler's name from promotional materials. Future trailers would focus on the film itself, not the cast. The original teaser, already met with overwhelming backlash, was suddenly pulled from circulation, and rumors spread that Disney was considering re-editing the movie in a last-ditch effort to fix the backlash. But there was no saving this film. Every move Disney made only dug them into a deeper hole.
Did I frighten you?
I let myself go all the way with the drama and with the character to really celebrate the evil queen.
And with the release date creeping closer, one terrifying question loomed over the entire company. What if Snow White 2025 is the biggest box office bomb in Disney history? They weren't ready for the answer. As the dust settled from Rachel Zegler's firing, Disney was left staring down a financial disaster of historic proportions. The decision to remove her from all future projects wasn't just about damage control. It was a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding before it was too late. But the real problem wasn't Rachel Zegler anymore. It was Snow White 2025 itself. A movie so fundamentally broken that even Disney's most loyal fans refused to support it. Behind closed doors, panic turned into full-scale crisis management. Studio executives knew they were sitting on a box office time bomb, and every attempt to fix it had only made things worse. Delaying the film would cost millions more in marketing and reshoots. Scrapping it entirely would mean admitting failure on a global scale, but releasing it as is, that could be the worst decision of all. At the same time, Hollywood was watching this disaster unfold with morbid curiosity. Rival studios whispered that Disney had become too arrogant, too obsessed with pushing messages over making great films. And Snow White 2025?
Co-stars? Sure. Friends? Not even close. E.T. has learned there has definitely been tension between Snow White leading ladies Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler.
Was now the poster child for corporate overreach. Every interview clip of Zegler mocking the original movie had been preserved forever on the internet, and no amount of damage control could erase the fact that Disney had allowed this project to spiral completely out of control. Then, in a shocking twist, reports surfaced that Disney executives were considering one last desperate move, pulling the film before it ever hit theaters. Industry insiders speculated that Disney might release Snow White directly to Disney Plus in an attempt to avoid total box office humiliation. Others believed the film would be delayed indefinitely, quietly buried, and never spoken about again. If this happened, it would be one of the most expensive write-offs in Hollywood history, ranking alongside disasters like Batgirl and The Flash. Meanwhile, Disney's stockholders were getting nervous. The company was already reeling from a series of financial missteps. The Marvels had bombed at the box office, Indiana Jones, and The Dial of Destiny had failed to turn a profit, and Disney Plus was bleeding subscribers at an alarming rate. If Snow White 2025 crashed and burned, it wouldn't just be an embarrassment, it could cripple Disney's financial future. Bob Iger now faced an impossible decision. Would Disney push forward and pray for a miracle? Or would they make the call to kill their own movie before it had a chance to destroy them? Either way, one thing was clear. Snow White 2025 was no longer a fairy tale. It was a cautionary tale of how Hollywood arrogance, corporate greed, and complete disregard for the audience can turn a beloved classic into a modern-day disaster. The moment of truth had arrived. Disney was out of options. The Snow White 2025 controversy had spiraled far beyond anything the studio had anticipated, and no amount of marketing spin, re-edits, or corporate maneuvering could save it. The public had completely turned against the film, and even Disney's most die-hard supporters were beginning to question the company's direction. The brand was collapsing under its own weight. Behind the scenes, executives held emergency meetings, analyzing every possible way to limit the damage. The numbers were in, and they were devastating. Pre-release tracking showed near zero audience interest.
You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group, you just erase that whole image.
Advanced ticket sales were abysmal. Theater chains were already scaling back screenings, expecting a financial disaster. In short, this wasn't just going to be a flop, it was going to be a historic embarrassment. At this point, there was only one question left. Would Disney even release the movie at all? Rumors began circulating that Bob Iger himself had stepped in, considering the nuclear option, canceling Snow White entirely and writing it off as a financial loss. This wouldn't be unprecedented. Warner Bros. Had already shelved Batgirl after negative test screenings, opting to take a tax write-off instead of risking further brand damage. Was Disney about to do the same? But pulling the film would come with its own set of problems. Hundreds of millions had already been spent. Marketing campaigns were already in motion. If Disney suddenly canceled the movie, it would admit to the world that they had failed. And for a company built on the illusion of magic, that was the one thing they could never afford to do. As the release date loomed closer, one final twist sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Reports surfaced that Disney was preparing to bury the film on Disney Plus, quietly dropping it with zero fanfare in the hopes that it would simply fade into obscurity. No red carpet premiere, no massive media push, just a silent, humiliating release. An unceremonious ending for what was once meant to be the studio's next billion-dollar blockbuster.